Hi, I'm Pat Kiernan. Glad you could be with us for today's edition of Pat's Papers. We go through the nation's newspapers to bring you the highlights. Here's our top story today. There will be no car czar. The Detroit News reports the White House is dropping plans to appoint a car czar. Instead, the Obama administration will name a team led by Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner to oversee the restructuring of the auto industry. A senior administration official would not rule out the possibility that GM and Chrysler may need to seek bankruptcy protection in the process. The New York Times has the story on its front page, noting that restructuring expert Ron Bloom will be brought in as a senior advisor to the government. Bloom has a Wall Street background, but frequently has been an advisor to the big labor unions, so he may play a key role in trying to repackage Detroit's crippling labor and retirement costs. One other note about the car industry from the front page of the LA Times, a story about sibling rivalry. GM's favorite child is the new Chevy Malibu. It was voted the 2008 North American Car of the Year by auto writers. GM has spent nearly $250 million on advertising, calling it the car you can't ignore. The less favored child is the similarly sized and priced Chevy Impala. GM hasn't run a national ad for the Impala in 3 years. Last year, for every 2 Malibus the company sold, it delivered 3 Impalas, making the Impala the best-selling sedan in the U.S. On the op-ed page of the New York Times this morning, Paul Krugman writes into the headline, "Decade at Bernie's." He says investors in Bernie Madoff's funds are not the only ones who've lost a lot in the past decade. Krugman writes, "They discovered to their horror that their supposed wealth was a figment of someone else's imagination." He goes on to say that's a good metaphor for what happened to everybody's investments recently. It seems as if the embattled Illinois politician torch has been passed from Rod Blagojevich to Roland Burris. The Chicago Tribune's front page says perjury. Burris says no. The Illinois senator is blamed for only recently detailing his past conversations regarding the open Senate seat with 5 close associates of the disgraced Blagojevich. Burris says he didn't provide a full explanation of the conversations because nobody pressed the point during his sworn testimony last month. Some Republicans are now calling for Burris's resignation. A big story from Pakistan this morning, getting a lot of play in papers nationwide, seen here in the Miami Herald. Pakistan's government has struck a deal with Islamist militants who dominate the country's northwest to impose Sharia law in those parts of the country. President Asif Zardari says the Islamists are trying to take over the state. A U.S. military study is expected to prove that Pakistan is a more urgent foreign policy challenge for President Obama than either Iraq or Iran. Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez has ended his presidential term limits in the country, according to the New York Times. The referendum received 54% of voter support. That vote opens the way for Chavez to run for a new 6-year term when his current one expires in 2013. One more note here from the Times. Interesting article at the scramble for stimulus cash. It's expected to officially begin after President Obama signs the stimulus bill on Tuesday. The paper says the bill is expected to set off a multitude of fund lobbying political battles between governors and legislatures, between state capitals and city halls. To the Washington Post, meet Olympia Snowe and Susan Collins, the 2 Republican senators with the biggest voices of late. Maine's 2 congressional leaders are 2 of the 3 GOP senators who broke ranks with their party to support the stimulus bill. The Post considers the huge influence the 2 moderate GOPers might wield over the next few years. There's an interesting study about happiness in the Boston Herald. For 3 decades, it's been believed that bliss declines in parents after experiencing childbirth. The reason is that more housework and less money come along. However, 2 psychologists from the University of California at Berkeley say if both partners are equally pleased about a pregnancy and careful not to backslide into traditional gender roles, most couples do return to their previous levels of satisfaction. Interesting piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer today examining the hard-knock lives of black market day laborers. They work street corners or parking lots. Described as the bottom rung of the economy, these laborers earn about $100 a day or sometimes get stiffed after a hard day's work. One labor studies professor says day labor roles are an enduring institution that different ethnic groups have passed through at different periods in American history. America's bird is flourishing since being taken off the endangered species list in 2007. A lovely image on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, accompanying a story about the 1,000 bald eagles that congregate at Northern California each February. Bald eagles were near extinction in the 1970s, but they have slowly rebounded to population levels not seen in a century. Still with nature, the Detroit News has the story on a marine census released today documenting 7,500 species in the Antarctic and 5,500 in the Arctic. New discoveries in marine life include a sea spider species as big as a human hand and tiny shrimp-like crustaceans in the Arctic basin that live at a depth of 9,850 feet. Finally, President Obama has more of a reason to smile every time he's compared to Abraham Lincoln. According to a C-SPAN survey published in the Seattle Times, Americans think Lincoln is the greatest American president of all time. The recently departed George W. Bush ranked 36th out of the 42 men who have ever held the office. And that's our look at what's in the nation's newspapers this morning. I'm Pat Kiernan. Thanks for joining us. Go to patspapers.com, where you will find the complete list of all of the stories we featured today, along with links to the individual newspaper websites.